Some people complain when Amazon takes 2 extra days to deliver, but in the places in this video, delivery can be seasonal, and going outside can feel like a mission. Today you're going to see the 10 most isolated towns in America you've probably never even heard of. A town where your car has to stop at a parking lot and you have to walk in. A town where almost everyone lives in the same building. A place in Washington where to drive back to America, you have to loop through Canada. And number 1 is on another level. You can stand on U.S. soil, see Russia with your own eyes, and the time is almost a full day apart. Don't look away, because there's one place on this list where just hearing how they get their mail will make far away feel like a weak word. Number 10, Supai, Arizona. In Arizona, there is a place where the modern American instinct to just drive over there simply stops working. Because Supai is not a town you roll into. It is a town you descend into. It sits deep inside Havasu Canyon, roughly 3,000 feet below the rim, where the world feels like it has been folded inward and tucked away from everything loud, fast, and convenient. The closest thing to a front door is a trailhead at Hualapai Hilltop, and from there, the main road is an 8-mile hike down into the canyon. 8 miles one way on foot just to reach the post office. That alone should tell you how isolated this place really is. Supai is home to the Havasupai people, and it is also the gateway to those unreal blue-green waters you have probably seen online. But the most fascinating part is not the color of the creek. It is the way life actually works down here. Because Supai does not have the normal safety net of a town connected by highways. There is no line of delivery vans cruising in at 6 p.m. There is no quick run to a big box store. If you need something, you plan ahead. You ration. You think like someone living at the bottom of a canyon, not like someone with 3 grocery stores within 10 minutes. And then there is the mail. In most of America, mail is a truck and a schedule. In Supai, mail comes with hooves. The U.S. Postal Service has a long-running tradition here of carrying letters and packages by mule along the trail. Picture that for a second. Somewhere out there, a box with someone's name on it is bouncing gently in a pack load, moving through switchbacks like, it is 1935, and nobody told this canyon that the internet happened. If you are the kind of person who complains when shipping takes more than 2 days, Supai will teach you humility with a smile. Yes, there are other ways in. People can ride a horse. Some supplies come by helicopter, but nothing about Supai ever feels casual. Even the weather can remind you who is in charge. Heavy rains and flash floods can disrupt trails and routines fast, turning a travel plan into a patience test. Down here, preparation is not a hobby, it is the cost of entry. Supai is not just isolated by distance. It is isolated by design, by terrain, by the simple fact that you cannot fake your way into it. You earn it step by step. And if hiking 8 miles just to reach town sounds intense, the next place on this list is going to make your idea of remote feel like a short commute. So number 9, Whittier, Alaska. In Alaska, there is a town where running an errand depends on a mountain's permission. Welcome to Whittier, a tiny coastal community with a population that hovers around a few hundred, tucked at the end of Prince William Sound. On a map, it looks close enough to Anchorage to feel civilized, but in real life, Whittier behaves like an island that just happens to touch the mainland. Because if you want to drive into Whittier, you do not just turn off the highway and cruise in. You go through the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel, a 5-mile passage carved straight through rock. It is a 1-lane tunnel that shares space with a railroad, which means traffic moves on a schedule. One direction goes, then the other direction goes, like the town is taking turns with the outside world. Miss your window and congratulations, you are not late. You are officially waiting for Alaska. Now here's the part that makes Whittier famous. Most of the town lives in one building, not one neighborhood, one building. Begich Towers is a 14-story structure that started life in the military era and slowly became the center of civilian life. People live there and a lot of daily routines connect back to it. When the weather is nasty, that building is not just housing, it is survival strategy. You can move from your apartment to essentials without feeling like you are stepping into a wind tunnel. And the weather in Whittier does not play nice. This is one of those places where precipitation is measured in numbers that sound like a typo. The area is known for relentless rain and heavy snow, the kind that turns a simple walk into a negotiation with the elements. In winter, the idea of spreading your life across a bunch of separate houses starts to feel like a bad design choice. In Whittier, staying close together is efficiency. It is warmth. It is sanity. Even when the sky clears, the town still feels like it is living on the edge of something. Whittier has these leftovers from its military past, including a massive eerie building nearby that looks like it belongs in a Cold War documentary. It is a quiet reminder that this place was never built to be convenient. It was built to endure. So what does daily life feel like here? It is small, familiar, and practical. Your world is compact. Your neighbors are not just nearby, they are basically in the same vertical zip code. And every time you drive out, you pass through that tunnel again, like a reset button between Whittier and everywhere else. If Supai was a town you earned step by step, Whittier is a town you enter by appointment. And the next place on this list is going to make even that tunnel feel like a normal commute. Number 8. Point Roberts, Washington. In Washington State, there is a town where going to the rest of America often starts by leaving America. This is Point Roberts, a small community perched on the tip of a peninsula that sits below the 49th parallel. On the map, it looks like it should be an easy drive to anywhere in Washington. In reality, it is a geographic loophole with a zip code. Here is the strange part. Point Roberts is American territory, but it is cut off from the mainland United States by Canada. If you want to drive to Bellingham, Seattle, or basically anywhere else in Washington, you usually have to cross into Canada first, then cross back into the United States. It is the kind of place where a simple grocery run can come with a border crossing. Imagine explaining that to someone from Texas. Yeah, I live in Washington. To get to Washington, I go through Canada. That sentence should not work, but here it does. Point Roberts exists because of an old decision drawn on a map. In the 1800s, the border between the U.S. and British North America was set along the 49th parallel in this region. And since this little slice of land happened to be south of that line, it stayed American even though everything around it is Canadian. One historical penstroke turned daily life into an ongoing logistics puzzle. The town itself is small, the kind of place where everyone knows the rhythm of the roads and the border booths. The community has the essentials, but it also has a permanent awareness that the outside world is one checkpoint away. If the border is smooth, life feels normal. If the border is slow, life starts to feel cramped. And because so much local business is tied to cross-border visitors, the town's economy can rise and fall with whatever is happening at the crossings. In some moments, the place feels like a quiet American beach town. In other moments, it feels like a waiting room with ocean views. Even the everyday details remind you where you are. People talk about prices in both currencies. Businesses are used to Canadian customers. The whole town operates with this subtle two-country instinct, even though it is officially just one. Point Roberts is not isolated by mountains or deserts. It is isolated by geography and paperwork. It is the kind of isolation that does not look scary until you live inside it. And then you realize how much modern life depends on easy movement. So if you ever complain that your commute is annoying, remember there is a town in America where the most direct route to your own state comes with an international border. And the next place on this list makes even that feel straightforward. At number 7, Tangier Island, Virginia. Out in the Chesapeake Bay, there is a place that feels less like modern America and more like a living postcard that somehow refused to fade. This is Tangier Island, Virginia, a tiny community sitting low and flat on the water where the horizon is wide, the roads are narrow, and the loudest traffic problem is a line of golf carts. Tangier is isolated in the most literal way. You do not drive here, You arrive by boat or by a small plane, landing on a short island runway. In the warmer months, ferries and cruises bring visitors across the bay, and in the off-season, the island can feel like it is holding its breath. The island is small enough that bicycles and golf carts become the default transportation, and once you are there, the world shrinks down to docks, marsh, a few lanes, and the steady rhythm of the tide. But Tangier is not just remote, it is distinct. The people here are known as watermen, and for generations the island's economy has revolved around the bay, especially crabbing and seafood work. Life follows seasons more than schedules. You can almost feel it in the air. The bay feeds you, the bay pays you, and the bay decides whether tomorrow is a good day or a stay inside kind of day. And then there is the way people sound. Tangier is famous for its local accent, a dialect that developed in a community, separated by miles of water and decades of routine. To a mainland ear, it can sound unusual, like familiar English, filtered through a different timeline. It is one of those rare American places where you can hear isolation, not just see it. There is also a quiet tension beneath the charm. Tangier sits only a few feet above sea level, and for years, the island has been losing land to erosion and rising waters. People who have lived here their whole lives talk about shoreline that used to be farther out, houses and marsh that used to exist, places that were once normal parts of the island and are now just memory. The threat does not come with sirens. It comes with small changes that add up year after year until the map itself starts to look different. That combination is what makes Tangier so haunting and so fascinating. It is peaceful, but it is fragile. It is friendly, but it is far. It is the kind of place that makes you slow down without asking, because out here everything is measured by weather, water, and patience. If your idea of isolation is being 10 minutes from the nearest coffee shop, Tangier will reset your definition. And the next town on this list is going to take that feeling and flip it in a completely different direction. Number 6. Monowi, Nebraska. In the middle of Nebraska, there is a town where the local government can fit in one chair. This is Monowi, and yes, it is famous for a reason that sounds like a joke until you realize it is real. The population is essentially one person, one resident, one neighbor, one set of keys to the whole place. Monowi is an incorporated village, which means on paper it is still a town with a name, boundaries, and official responsibilities. But in real life, it feels like a dot on the plains that time slowly walked away from. The village is tiny, about a fraction of a square mile, the kind of place where you could drive through and miss it if you blink at the wrong moment. The single resident at the center of this story is Elsie Eiler, and here is where Monowi becomes unforgettable. Elsie is not just a citizen. She is the mayor. She is the clerk. She handles the paperwork that keeps Monowi officially alive. She maintains the routine that most towns spread across dozens of people and an entire building called City Hall. In Monowi, City Hall is basically wherever Elsie happens to be standing. She also runs the Monowi Tavern, which is the closest thing this town has to a social center. People stop in on road trips, locals from nearby areas swing by, and for a few hours, Monowi feels less like a disappearing town and more like a tiny checkpoint of human connection in a huge stretch of open land. The funniest detail is also the most telling one. To keep the tavern operating, the town needs licenses and approvals. And since Elsie is the town, the signatures that keep the business legal are also her signatures. In most places, that would be a scandal. Here it is just Tuesday, but Monowi is not only a quirky headline, it has a soft, surprising heartbeat. There is a small library called Rudy's Library named for Elsie's late husband. Inside are thousands of books sitting quietly on shelves, available through an honor system where you borrow and return like everyone can still be trusted. That library turns Monowi from a novelty into something heavier. It is proof that even when people leave, a place can still hold memory, purpose, and love. Monowi is isolated in a different way than a town surrounded by mountains or cut off by water. It is isolated because the population drained away, one decade at a time, until only one person remained to keep the lights on and the story going. And if you think that kind of isolation is intense, the next town on this list will show you what happens when the distance itself becomes the enemy. Number 5. Coldfoot, Alaska. On Alaska's Dalton Highway, there is a point where remote stops being a description and starts being a warning label. That point is Coldfoot, and calling it a town is almost too generous. Coldfoot is more like a survival checkpoint, a place that exists because the road ahead does not forgive mistakes. Coldfoot sits in the middle of the haul road, that rugged industrial highway, built to serve the oil fields of the North Slope. It is surrounded by wilderness so vast it makes your phone feel like a toy. This is the place people talk about when they say, "Fill up here because after this, good luck." From Coldfoot to Deadhorse, the next major stop near Prudhoe Bay, you are looking at roughly 240 miles with no services, no fuel, no restaurants, no cozy roadside motel. Just a long stretch of gravel, heavy trucks, weather that can change its mood in minutes, and the unsettling realization that you are very far from help. If you are used to road trips in the lower 48, where every exit promises gas, snacks, and a clean bathroom, Coldfoot will feel like a different planet. Here, running out of fuel is not inconvenient. It is the kind of mistake that turns a fun adventure into a serious problem. And cell service is often spotty or non-existent, which means you cannot simply tap your way out of trouble. You have to think ahead. You have to carry what you need. You have to respect the distance. That is why Coldfoot Camp matters. It is a cluster of practical comforts that feel almost luxurious when you have been staring at endless forest and mountain for hours. Hot food, a bed, fuel, a warm place to sit and listen to other travelers swap stories like you are all part of the same strange club. People come through here in summer chasing the Arctic Circle and in winter when the world is darker, colder, and even less interested in your plans. Coldfoot also has a kind of origin story that fits the road. This place grew out of the needs of people moving through harsh country, and it still runs on that same logic. It is not here to be charming. It is here to keep you moving. And that is the feeling Coldfoot gives you. You are not sightseeing anymore. You are preparing. You are checking your gear. You are doing the mental math of miles, fuel, daylight, and weather. Because from this point north, the highway does not offer many second chances. If Supai taught you humility one step at a time and Whittier taught you patience on a schedule, Coldfoot teaches you something simpler. Out here, distance is the boss, and the next place on this list will make even Coldfoot feel like it has too many amenities. Number 4. Adak, Alaska. Out in the Aleutian Islands, there is a town that feels like someone built a small city, then quietly walked away and forgot to turn the lights off. This is Adak, Alaska. It sits far out in the chain of islands that stretch toward Asia, surrounded by cold ocean, heavy wind, and the kind of emptiness that makes a normal grocery store feel like a luxury. Adak is not isolated because it is hidden behind mountains or buried in a canyon. Adak is isolated because it is out there. Way out there. Getting here is mainly an airplane decision. Flights do not run like a city shuttle. They run like a reminder that nature and distance set the schedule. When weather rolls in, the island does not negotiate. You wait. And then you realize what makes Adak so strange. The town you see today is living inside the leftovers of a much bigger place. For decades, Adak was a major U.S. Navy installation, a strategic outpost in the North Pacific. During the Cold War, it mattered. It was built to watch, patrol, and respond. It had the kind of infrastructure you would expect for thousands of people. Roads, warehouses, housing, big utility systems, a serious runway, a whole military world planted on an island of tundra and fog. Then the mission ended. The base was closed in the late 1990s and Adak became something rare. A community of a few hundred, then fewer, living inside the shell of a former military town. Today the population is small, closer to a neighborhood than a city, but the stage around it still feels oversized. You can walk past empty buildings and wide streets that were designed for a different era, and it gives the place an eerie cinematic quality. It is not a ghost town because people still live here, but it carries that quiet, after-hours feeling, like the island is remembering what it used to be. Life in Adak runs on a different kind of planning. Supplies are not a quick run to the next county. Weather can delay everything. The wind is not an occasional inconvenience. It is part of the environment, part of the personality of the place. Even in summer, it can feel cold and restless, like the air never fully settles down. But Adak is not only bleak, it is also wild. The landscape is open and dramatic, with tundra stretching toward the sea, birds everywhere, and pockets of wildlife that make the island feel alive in a way cities never do. That contrast is what sticks with you. You are standing in the ruins of Cold War infrastructure, and right beside it is nature doing what it has always done, completely uninterested in human history. Adak proves that isolation can look like two things at once: a place with too much empty building and too much open horizon. And the next town on this list takes that feeling of far away and pushes it even closer to the edge of the map. 3. McCarthy, Alaska. In Alaska, there is a place where your road trip ends in a parking lot and your arrival starts on foot. This is McCarthy, a tiny community hidden inside the Wrangell-St. Elias region, where the wilderness is so big it makes normal distance feel meaningless. People call it remote, but that word does not fully cover it. McCarthy is the kind of remote that asks you politely but firmly, "Did you come prepared?" To reach it, you take the McCarthy Road, a roughly 60-mile stretch that is mostly unpaved and famous for washboard bumps, potholes, and the kind of gravel that teaches your tires new emotions. The National Park Service even warns drivers to budget about 2 hours each way because this is not a road you rush. There are long sections with very limited services, so you fill your tank early, carry a real spare, and keep your expectations humble. Then you hit the part that makes McCarthy unforgettable. At the end of the road, you park. That is it. No cruising into town, no pulling up to a cute Main Street cafe. Instead, you cross the Kennecott River on a pedestrian bridge like you are stepping into a different set of rules. On the far side, you can walk or bike into McCarthy or catch a seasonal shuttle deeper toward Kennecott. The distances sound small on paper, half a mile here, a few miles there, but after that drive, even a short walk feels like a ceremony. It is the town's way of saying, you wanted remote, earn it. And what you earn is not just a quirky little settlement. McCarthy is the doorway to one of the most dramatic pieces of American history you can stand inside. Just a few miles beyond is Kennecott, the famous copper mining complex that once ran like an industrial machine in the middle of nowhere. In the early 20th century, this place processed massive amounts of copper, with workers living and working in a harsh landscape that looks like it should be empty. Today, the old mill buildings still rise above the valley like a rust-colored monument, part ghost, part museum, and completely out of place in the best possible way. That contrast is what keeps your brain hooked. One minute you are thinking about your suspension and your gas gauge. The next minute you are staring at the remains of a company town that existed because copper was worth the trouble. McCarthy feels like a modern outpost wrapped around an old ambition. And if you think a town that makes you abandon your car at the gate is extreme, the next place on this list takes isolation and turns it into something even harder to ignore. Number 2, Hyder, Alaska. There is a corner of Alaska where the road does something strange. It lets you drive into the United States, through Canada, and it barely announces that you arrived. This is Hyder, Alaska, a tiny place, pressed against the border so tightly that it almost feels like an extension of its Canadian neighbor, Stewart, British Columbia. Hyder is isolated in a way most Americans never think about. It is not connected by road to the rest of Alaska. If you want to reach it by car, you come in from Canada down Highway 37A through Stewart, and then you simply roll into Hyder. No big welcome sign, no grand entrance. And the weirdest part is that when you enter Hyder, there is typically no U.S. border booth stopping you on the way in. But when you turn around to go back to Canada, that is when the border becomes very real. It is the kind of place that makes you feel like geography is playing a practical joke with paperwork. Hyder is small. Census numbers put it under 50 residents in recent years. That is not a typo. Fewer than 50 people. You could lose an entire town population inside a single Costco on a Saturday. And because life is so intertwined with Stewart, Hyder often runs on Pacific time in practice, even though on paper it sits in Alaska's time zone. When your neighbor is 2 miles away and your supplies come from the Canadian side, the clock becomes a suggestion. Hyder also leans into its own identity. You will see it described as the friendliest ghost town in Alaska. And the vibe matches. It has that half-asleep, half-legendary feel, like the town is living on stories, visitors, and the stubborn decision to remain on the map. But the real reason people come here is not the border oddness. It is the wildlife. Just a few miles outside town is Fish Creek, one of the most famous bear viewing spots in the region. In late summer, when salmon are running, brown bears and black bears show up like they own the place, because in a way, they do. There is a raised boardwalk for viewing, and the experience feels strangely intimate. You are close enough to see the power in their shoulders, close enough to hear the water, and sometimes far enough from cell service that you cannot distract yourself with a screen. Out there, your attention belongs to the creek. And if you keep going, you get one more reward. The drive towards Salmon Glacier, a massive sheet of ice you can approach by road in a way that feels almost impossible in North America. Border town, ghost town, bear town, glacier town. Hyder is all of them at once. If Monowi was isolated because people disappeared, Hyder is isolated because the road itself chose Canada first. And the next place on this list pushes isolation even further, to a point where distance stops being a concept and becomes a lifestyle. Number 1. Little Diomede, Alaska. Out in the Bering Strait, there is a place where geography bends your brain a little. This is Little Diomede, Alaska, a tiny village on a steep rock in the middle of the water, so far out that the world starts to feel like it has edges again. And the first reason people can't stop talking about it is simple. From here, you can literally see Russia. Just across the water sits Big Diomede, an island that belongs to Russia. The distance between them is only about 2.4 miles. On a clear day, it's right there on the horizon, close enough to feel almost touchable. But there is an invisible barrier that makes it feel worlds apart. The islands sit on opposite sides of the international date line, which means the clocks don't just differ by an hour or two, they differ by almost an entire day. One island is basically today, the other is basically tomorrow, even though the water gap between them is shorter than many people's daily commute. Now here is the part that turns Little Diomede from a cool fact into a true isolation story. This is not a place you casually travel to. There is no normal runway on the island. The terrain is steep, the weather is unforgiving, and access depends on conditions that do not care about your plans. In some winters, when the sea ice is stable enough, an ice runway can be carved out for small aircraft, but when the ice breaks up, that option disappears. Much of the time, the village relies on helicopters for critical transport, including things as basic as mail. And if the weather shuts that down, the island doesn't just get inconvenient. It gets quiet. Life on Little Diomede also looks different on the ground because the ground is not friendly. There are no real roads the way most Americans imagine them. Movement is mostly on foot, using boardwalk, stairs, and paths that connect homes in a village built on rock and slope. And everyday essentials can feel like chores from another century. Water, for example, is not always something you take for granted. The community uses stored and treated water from local sources, and people may have to haul what they need. In hard stretches, even simple access can become a real problem, and improvisation becomes part of routine. And yet this place is not just hardship, it's endurance. It's a community that has adapted to a location most of us would never choose, living with the ocean, the wind, the ice, and the strange feeling of being close to another world but separated by borders, time, and weather. Little Diomede is what isolated looks like at the extreme. Not a town at the end of a road, but a town beyond the idea of roads. And when you remember that you can stand there on American ground and see Russia in the distance, it makes you realize how small the planet is and how far away life can still feel. So after all that, isolation in America clearly isn't just one thing. Sometimes it's a canyon that swallows the road, sometimes it's a tunnel that controls your schedule, sometimes it's a border that turns a quick drive into an international trip. And sometimes it's a village on a rock where the mail arrives by helicopter and another country sits on the horizon like a mirage. These places don't just exist on a map, they exist on a different set of rules. And the wild part is this: people don't just survive there, they build routines, communities, and a kind of resilience most of us never have to practice. Now I'm curious, which town on this list shocked you the most? And which one could you actually imagine living in for a year? Drop your pick in the comments and tell me why. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because the next episode goes even deeper into the hidden corners of America.